In this video, I would like to offer some tips on creating a good speech topic. This is an area that seems to be a stumbling block for many students. And my first advice is go back to Bitzer. Bitzer really should be the starting point here. And I often point to my students the speech strategy report form, which you should have available shortly, and answer the first 4 questions. They are all inspired by Bitzer. Right off the bat, what's the exigence? What is it in this world that should be modified, changed in some way? And well, I'll come back to some of these in more detail, but start with something that needs to change and ask yourself, is it rhetorical? Is it something that can be changed? Can it be changed by an audience? And I think you're giving a speech to fellow classmates. They have to form the rhetorical audience. If you're unclear about any of this, go back to my first video on Bitzer and the nature of rhetoric. Rhetoric is that action to rhetoric at its essence is a call to action. There has to be a call to action. You see something in the world that needs to be changed. You are not able to change it, but it can be changed if you can find the right audience. And who is that right audience? That audience, the rhetorical audience, is the audience that is both able to effect a change and willing to effect a change. So you can sit back and ponder those things. That is your classmates. Your fellow classmates are your audience. In what way could they be a rhetorical audience? So, for example, someone says, hey, we need to build an oil pipeline from Alberta to BC. Can anybody in this classroom do it? No, they're not able. So instant, poof, they are not a rhetorical audience. If you ask them to do something they wouldn't want to do, then they're not a rhetorical audience either. So you need to think about something that would be of interest to them. They have some reason to say, yeah, I'll do that, sure. And something that they are able to do. A very important point here, and one area that stumbles up a lot of people, and especially if you're looking at YouTube videos you do a search, a quick YouTube search for rhetorical speeches. The vast majority are not rhetorical in the sense that we're using the word rhetoric and Bitzer's idea of rhetorical communication, which has at its heart a call to action. Many of these so-called rhetorical videos are simply calls to attempts to change someone's thought pattern, change their opinions. If you look at Bitzer, that's not rhetorical. They might be using techniques that we talk about in the rhetorical class, but they're not. There is no call to action. There is nothing, no way of verifying that they can do it. It's just, I'd like you to think about the world in a certain way. If Bitzer is right, I think he is, we encounter rhetorical situations all the time. In fact, probably more often than we would encounter, say, general persuasive communication situations where I want to change someone's opinion. In the workplace, I'm going to, ask fellow workers to do certain things. Okay? Hey, could you move those pallets from bay 1 to bay 2? Could you bring the pallet in bay 3 or to bay 1? Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? They're all call to actions. You go into a store and you ask for a cup of coffee. That's a call to action. That's rhetorical. If you go into a store and you say, hey, ask a clerk, where's the peanut butter? That's rhetorical. You're asking someone to do something for you or help you solve an exigence. Those are all rhetorical. Asking someone gee, I'd like you to think about the world in a different way is a different thing, and we actually don't encounter those very often, and it's not appropriate for a class in rhetorical communication, given the way we've defined and understood rhetoric. At the very heart is that call to action. And step back and just think, is my question rhetorical? Is there something in this world that can be changed, can be changed by this particular audience, and something that this particular audience would be willing to change and interested in? And there are a lot of ways to go here. You can start with negative things, are you stressed? Who wants to be stressed? Nobody wants to be stressed. Being unstressed is intuitively a positive thing, and you can count that as something that all of the audience members would agree to do. They would say, yeah, I'll take an action. I could take an action. I'd be willing to take an action that would relieve my stress. And then you can shape a call to action that would modify that exigence, because they're all stressed, eh? We're all stressed. So just grab a call to action. Meditation, yoga, walk in the forest, walk along the riverbank, play with dogs, play with animals, play with horses. There are countless ways of reducing stress. Depression is a big problem amongst university students, and actually the youth sector, people between 18 and 30 are suffering much more stress than they were just a little while ago. And it's tied probably to social media. So one call to action is, drop a social media app, or spend less time on social media. Think about your interactions in social media. These are all calls to action. Do something that will modify that exigence. And those are, that's a negative exigence that they would like to modify. There are, and open your mind up to alternatives here. Bitzer is quite open-ended here. An exigence is something that should be other than what it is. And I can say, hey, if you started playing an instrument, you could become smarter. If you did exercising, you could become smarter. If you learn a second language, you could become smarter. Becoming smarter, becoming better at something is an exit. It's a change in the current status situation. And I'm pretty sure every one of you would say, whoa, if I wouldn't mind being just a little bit smarter. Wouldn't hurt. So once again, you would have a rhetorical audience in your classroom. You would have an exigence, something which needs to be modified, and you would have an audience that would be willing and able to modify it. So it's rhetorical. And away you go. You have a speech.